Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sally Bremer, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm so pleased to introduce this virtual event celebrating Bookstore Romance Day. Thank you so much for joining us virtually tonight. This panel and today's events are in celebration of Bookstore Romance Day, founded by bookseller Billy Blowbaum. This day is designed to give independent bookstores an opportunity to celebrate romance fiction and to strengthen the relationships between bookstores and the romance community. Harvard Bookstore is thrilled to partner with indie bookstores across the country in dedicating a day to this diverse genre that always promises a happy ending. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and we'll get through as many as time allows. This event also has auto-generated closed captioning available. Depending on the version of Zoom you're using, you may need to enable captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. You can disable the captions there as well. In the chat during the event, I'll be posting links to purchase the featured books at this panel on harvard.com. Your purchases truly make events like today's possible and help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's panelists. Alexandria Bellefleur is a Lambda Literary Award winner and national best-selling author of swoony contemporary romance. Count Your Lucky Stars is the third book in her Written in the Stars series. ALYSSA COLE is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of romance and thrillers. Her contemporary royal rom-com, A Princess in Theory, was one of New York Times's 100 notable books of 2018, and How to Find a Princess is the second book in her Runaway Royals series. Anita Kelly writes romance that celebrates queer love in all its infinite possibilities. Love and Other Disasters is her debut full-length and traditionally published novel, and she just announced her forthcoming book, Something Wild and Wonderful, coming in 2023. And if you purchase a copy of Love and Other Disasters today and submit your receipt, you can get an ARC of Something Wild and Wonderful, by the way, fun fact. KOSOKO Jackson is a digital media specialist and author. He is the author of several YA novels and short stories. I'm So Not Over You is his debut adult romance. And Olivia Waite writes queer historical romance, fantasy, science fiction, and essays. She is the romance fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review, and The Hellion's Waltz is the third book in her Feminine Pursuit series. This panel will be moderated by Cecilia Tan, award-winning author of romance and science fiction. Tor Books will soon be publishing her new urban fantasy series, The Vanished Chronicles, where vampires aren't real, but erotic blood magic is, which sounds like exactly up the alley of this panel. We're so excited to welcome everyone to this event today, and the floor is yours. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Huzzah! Hello and welcome, and everyone across the country and the world. The authors are coming from many different cities and locales, so it's just great that we can be virtually together and fly in the middle of a new COVID wave to get where we're going. So hopefully we will all be transported in our imaginations in the same way that we are when we read a book. Since you all were introduced by name and a little bit about your work, I don't want to take up too much time with introductions, but I wanted you to maybe each just say a little bit about yourself and your work and sort of the way in which you self-define what you write and who you are as writers. And let's just go in alphabetical order, because otherwise I'll get you all confused. So we'll start with Alexandria.
Everyone, I'm Alexandria Bellefleur. As mentioned, Count Your Lucky Stars is the third book in my series. All the books are queer and normally have bisexual characters, a lot of bi rep. I kind of like to show bi characters in a variety of different relationships. That's really something that I like to represent in my work. All three books are standalones, but are best read as a series.
Very good.
Okay, I guess it's me. I'm like alphabet.
Alyssa next.
Yeah, I write a lot of different things, and Honestly, a lot of times I mean, from my first books, I've had queer characters and neurodivergent characters, not knowing I was either of those things. I was like, yeah, I just really want to add like bi people, lesbians, add all different gay people, have people from all different backgrounds. And what do you know? Like I was, my subconscious was like, hey. But yeah, so I've just been, my first novel came out in 2014. It was a romantic suspense. It's no longer in print. And yeah, I've been writing since then. Sci-fi, royal romance, historical romance, and thrillers.
All right, I'm the next A.
You're the next A.
So I am Anita Kelly. I'm a queer romance writer and an educator on the side now. But yeah, Love and Other Disasters was my debut that came out earlier this year. It feels like it was 5 years ago, but I guess it was just earlier this year. And I also have a series of novellas, and my next full-length book comes out next year. But yeah, I really like writing about queer love and all its possibilities, which is like my tagline. But yeah, so I like writing about a variety of, gendered pairings. I really like exploring gender in particular in my books, and body positivity and a whole variety of things in my work.
All right, Kosoko, you're next.
Hey everyone, my name is KOSOKO JACKSON. Just want to say it's really awesome to be on here with all these panelists that I've like talked to or admired before. That's just all. But yeah, I'm KOSOKO. I write queer rom-coms that star Black boys who fall in love. That's generally my spiel. Just like Jordan Peele doesn't write Black characters who die in his movies, Black boys will always have a happy ending in mind. They scan the gambit. They can either be very, very snarky, like in I'm So Not Over You, or in my new rom-com, A Dash of Salt and Pepper, they can be incredibly insecure, hidden by a veil of like degrees and professional success. So it just really depends. I kind of put a little facet of myself or a point of my life into all of these rom-coms. But yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Waite, and like my wonderful panelists before me, I like writing a full spectrum of queer, like found families and queer communities. I came out very late in life after I'd already written several historical romances, and like Alyssa mentioned, looking back, it was kind of like, maybe one of the reasons why I like describing historical women's garments was because I really like historical women and maybe just women in general. So after doing like 8 MF historicals and paranormals, I did a full trilogy of sapphic romances, and some of them are lesbians and one of them is pan, but half of them are bisexual, because I find the fluidity of bisexuality not only as something that I identify with, but also that's really fun for a lot of different story scenarios. So that's kind of where I'm going, but I'm kind of omnivorous about the queer characters that I read. I'm interested in like all of it. So it's very exciting.
Awesome. This is gonna love you, which is just, what is the best part about writing queer romance? If you could pick one thing that is the best thing. Let's go in the opposite order.
I think the thing that I like about it is the way it reforms a lot of story structures. The example that I'm going to use here is Alexis Hall's Something Fabulous, which was their first queer historical. And so the idea of 2 characters going on a road trip and then reputations being in danger is very familiar from a lot of historical romances. We have women who are courting scandal, and we have the idea that marriage will save them from that ruin. And suddenly you have 2 queer men on a road trip to save the reputation of the sister. But it's becoming increasingly clear that like the marriage to save the reputation would actually be like an enormous disaster, and that the real the real plot should be the love that's growing between these two men. And so like, I just think that the way that it plays with, that you can kind of both reframe structures and kind of like, I don't know, you know, when the camera spins around and perspective changes in like in a film shot, it feels like that. It feels like you see the story structures in their full three-dimensional glory, as opposed to just having them be flat two-dimensional tropes. And I know that's a really nerdy answer, but
this is the Harvard bookstore. It's okay. But you get to have your tropes and eat it too, kind of like.
Precisely.
Yeah, because they're fresh and new while being classic at the same time.
Which is what I usually shoot for. Yeah.
How about you, Kosoko? Best thing.
I actually think about this question a lot as a reader, more so actually as a TV watcher and as a movie watcher. When I started to like really get into my own writing and really understand like my queerness, I realized that like one of the key things that I realized that I personally always identify more of the female characters inside of TV shows and movies than male characters. And to me, some of the most interesting arcs that we have, at least personally, are the female characters. One thing that comes to mind is like historical fiction. I love me a period piece. You give me a movie where a woman has to buck society because her father wants her to get married, but she just wants to be a writer. And I love that. And to be able to take that and like take those tropes and apply it to queer stories while also being able to have this deeper discussion about familial expectations, society expectations, while you also layer, and at least for me, the layer of how society views African-American men is just a really interesting combination that just really leans very, very easily into queer romances.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, along similar lines too of the previous answers, but I feel like writing queer romance is really fantastic because no matter what story you tell, you know, if you tell it the right way, if you give it a happy ever after, it's revolutionary and empowering. Whether it's like, you know, a super light rom-com, with like, you know, no trauma at all, or if it's really heavy and dark and shows like, you know, working through different histories of queer trauma, like no matter what it is, you know, it has that happy ending that we haven't always had. And so, or that people haven't always seen, I should say, in media, not that we haven't always had it, but, and so, yeah, I find it really revolutionary, whether we just, you know, retell the same tropes 20 times, it's still different to queer it. So I find that really exciting.
Alyssa?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say much more than what everyone else has already said, but yeah, for me, the fun part is, yeah, it's kind of just taking these tropes, these situations that we've seen time and time again in het couples and cishet couples, and kind of just changing it up, creating these situations. And like, so queer romance has been around for a long time. I feel like traditional publishing is just, you know, finally getting around to being like, hey, we can make money on this. But I mean, we can support diversity, but it's been around for a long time, and it's now more widely available to people. But one of the fun things is that we are, in a way, there is a canon, but we are all adding to the canon of what has come before and to the canon that is more currently available to readers. So it's just like, I don't know, I feel like it's this huge, I don't want to say responsibility, but it's this like thing that we should all be proud of, I think.
Yeah, everyone has said it so well, so I won't take a whole lot of time on it, but I do think that queer romance provides such a great opportunity to breathe new life into the tropes, to show additional facets of beloved tropes like found family. Found family is amazing in all romances, it's my catnip, but in queer romances in particular, you know, that found family can be a lifeline to the characters and to then the readers. And it can be a touch point in providing readers not just the hope of a happily ever after, but the hope of a community. And so it's just showing other facets of what readers have potentially been reading and loving in other romances. Yeah.
Alexandria, I think that you're the one who loves grumpy sunshine as the trope.
I do.
Do you find it? I mean, I'll confess, my introduction to Grumpy Sunshine was Harry Snape fan fiction back in the day. So to me, I always associate it with kind of queer, same-sex relationships, but that's because my background comes out of that, But yeah, do you find that when you can switch up the sort of gendered expectations that you can do more with that trope?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because there's been a meme going around Twitter with like, opposites attract, reversed. And the thing with Grumpy Sunshine is I think a lot of people associate it with the guy is going to be the grumpy one. He's going to be the stern one. And, the woman is going to be kind of flighty and sunshiny and bring like light into his life and, add color to it. And in a queer romance, you don't have those boundaries. You shouldn't have them in a straight romance either. But I think it's very freeing to not look at those gender norms. You can break those barriers down in a queer romance. So yeah, I definitely think Grumpy Sunshine is one of those opposites attract. Anything that has certain like cishet norms associated with it, you can smash it down in a queer romance.
Totally cool. I gotta read my own handwriting now. All right, but talking about writing both queer romance, straight romance, and/or romance in the various categories, this is probably mostly for Alyssa and Olivia, but you might want to jump in on it as well. Basically, how does your publisher or your publishers treat your queer books differently, or do they treat them differently? I feel like they're kind of trying to treat them exactly like they treat other romances, and I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, or if that's just what they do.
I would say for me, it's interesting because, like I said, from my first book, I was already writing queer characters. My first book was originally going to be a series. It was with Lucid, R.I.P. Lucid. And for the second book, so in the original book, there was that couple, then her best friend was bi, and his partner was a lesbian, and they were not going to get together, so there were going to be 2 additional books. And then my editor at the time was like, you can write FF, but like people aren't buying that. And I do want to add that she was not like being like, don't write it. She literally, because I was very new to the genre, it was my first book that was getting published, my first series. And she was like, you can write it. I'm not going to tell you not to write it. But at the time, and that's a whole other topic to get into, which is that she wasn't saying we don't want to publish it. She was saying that it's not very popular amongst our readers. And I was like, I'm going to write it anyway. But then I ended up writing, starting off, selling off the Grid series, and then just going that. It was another mixed series, mixed orientation. And in that series, the second book was MM. And so basically my whole career has been like that, and I've never really had an issue. My editors were usually cool, and I've never really had a publisher say something, but I will add that I never asked. I don't I'm not going to write something I don't want to write. And I basically, like, the first book I had the first queer book that I had that came out with Avon was a novella, and it was kind of like, Big Five publishers were not really doing FF at the time. I was like, well, I'm going to write this. Not like I'm like, oh, like some whatever, but I was just, I'm going to write it. My editor was like, she was not going to fight me on it. She likes what I write. So she was like, okay, cool. I wrote it and we published it. The second book, How to Find a Princess, was originally pitched as something else completely different. That was MF. And then I was like, actually, I wrote a completely different book. It's an FF. And then that's what happened. So I did not get pushback, but on a certain level, there was no room for pushback, because it's just like, this is what I wrote, this is what we have to publish. So, but also my editor is extremely cool. There could be people who are not cool. I don't talk to them. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Alyssa. I am in the weird experience of having sold an FF trilogy at a time when the rule, like Alyssa said, was that FF doesn't sell, that readers weren't hungry for it, and that is pretty much wrong. But we didn't know it at the time. And Alyssa said, like, oh, I'm gonna barrel through, write what I want. I absolutely did do that. I was reviewing for a local outlet at the time, and I kept asking publicists to send me an FF historical because I really wanted to read one. And I found a few, and some of them were wonderful, but none of them was really scratching this itch for me. And so eventually I just said, screw this, I have to write it myself. I know exactly what an Avon style historical with two women is going to sound like here. And I'm just going to write this for me. This will be fun. I can write something marketable later. And then I sold that book before it was finished, which was definitely a first for me. And now it's an entirely different kind of querying process. So the series is complete, and I've been trying to figure out where to go next. And wherever I go next is going to be queer. I'm thinking of like, I have some things with queer women that I'm planning out. I have some things that are bisexual romances that I'm planning out. I really want to write a queer MF because I love them so much. They're so dear to my heart. Alexandrias are marvelous. So it's going to be like very interesting to see what happens next for me. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm super anxious about it. This is a rough time to be querying things. Like, wow. But at the same time, getting to do this FF series and seeing the sea change that we've seen about FF romance in the trad pub market. I think it was Dahlia Adler who pointed out that this year we have more FFs coming out from traditional houses than we have MM, which has never happened before.
That is,
and I think a lot that's due to the work of a lot of writers and readers and people really talking those things up.
Yeah, and it is a sea change. Anyone who's coming onto this boat late, yeah, for a long time it was like, well, queer was basically all MM because there was this perception that the straight readers would buy and read it. And I think there's an overestimation of how straight the whole world actually is, honestly. You know, and then when it comes to consumption of media, I think people are very open to more things, but they didn't have more choices on the buffet table, so they went to the thing that was there. You know, so I'm so happy to see so many more things appearing on the buffet table. Kosoko, I wanted to ask you one thing, and if anyone else has experience that can jump in on this also, but about the difference between writing YA and writing adult romance, where adult doesn't mean like it's necessarily hot, steamy. It means the readers that you're aiming at are meant to be adults, as opposed to the YA market.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see is the difference in these two age brackets is that for me, when I write my YA romance, I'm usually coming from it from a one-dimensional point of view. And I don't mean one-dimensional in a negative way. I mean that teens typically come into a first love with, they don't have the baggage of love that comes from adults. There's not these deep internal issues that come with maybe breakups or great loves or other things that come that kind of like, I don't want to say pollute, but actually do influence how we as adults navigate romantic relationships. And that doesn't mean that they're not any stronger, because teen feelings are incredibly strong. They're as strong as like a neutron sun. And that's an important thing to focus on, but it doesn't have the same levels of complexity. The complexity is different. When it comes from my adult romances, there's just a lot more things that come into being an adult. Another person told me that like, for an adult, love is usually not the primary thing. You have a life, you have a house, you have a family, you have bills. And so that always comes and influences how you navigate that world, and taking all those things into consideration to make sure that it feels authentic and not feels like love conquers all. I think it's a great idea to say love conquers all, but love does not pay the bills. And these are things that I feel like adults think about.
True. All right. Anyone else want to jump in on there? No? I got plenty more questions. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time as well, so that we'll have time to get to. Don't forget, audience, put your questions in the Q&A bar so that I'll be able to see them, and we'll pile some of those on at the end.
I had actually had a brief story relevant to your previous question about like differences between like marketing or pitching queer romance versus straight romance. And obviously I don't have the depth of experience as the other people on this panel. But it was kind of interesting when I was on sub with Love and Other Disasters, which basically means you're trying to sell it to an editor and a publishing house. So my book features a non-binary main character. And when we were querying it or putting it on sub, we didn't specifically market it as own voices because I have lots of feelings about own voices. And there was one house that rejected me because it wasn't labeled own voices because they had never published a non-binary story before, and they didn't feel comfortable doing that without it being labeled own voices. And so like in one aspect, I respect that. But then in another aspect, it felt like really crappy to have like my own personal like identity kind of on the line of whether we sell this book or not. That like, you know, a cis het person probably wouldn't have to go through and selling their cis het romance. So that was one experience.
Right. I wanted to ask, actually, do you feel like you had to do a lot of education to your, even after your editor has bought it, you know, and they're reading the manuscript, did you feel like you had to do a lot of education of your editor of like what non-binary means, what it is, how this is different? And then did the editor feel like you had to put that in the book to the reader as well?
No, so I would say so, you know, yes and no. I would say my main editor was awesome. Yeah, I didn't feel like I had to do like any like education, of her in the editing process. Really, it was mostly like my neuroses. Like I went back and forth about how like didactic I should be in the text about like being non-binary and gender, because like I didn't want it to come across like this is what being non-binary is. You know, I wanted it to be like an organic love story. And so like I wavered back and forth a lot about my language choices. But there was, like, I would say I think it was maybe like in copy edits, like I used the phrase, you know, non-binary and transness, like, you know, often in the manuscript. And there were a few comments of like, well, London is non-binary, they're not trans, like, do you mean non-binary here? And so like I did kind of have to be like, well, some non-binary people do, like, you know, identify as within the trans umbrella and some don't, but London does, so yeah, they're trans. And so like it was kind of like that whole, yes, there's a little bit of like education there, but like even like as I was like, sorry, my cat is meowing, but she's angry about this.
The cat is very passionate about copy editing.
Yeah. But there is like always like a level of doubt of like, you know, yourself, even when you are describing issues that are close to you. I'm like, yeah, I think London can say they're trans, right? And like, you know, it's like as I'm, you know, defending myself, I'm still kind of like, I hope
right.
correct. But yeah. But overall, no, my publisher was super supportive, and yeah, and like specifically wanted to get the book out to other queer and like non-binary reviewers, and that was really important to do. So like and they just like suggested that I didn't even have to push for it. So yeah, overall it was a really wonderful experience.
Very, very good. So you touched on a little bit, KOSOKO touched on a little bit about taking a little piece of yourself, and that ends up in your main character sometimes, and maybe in every character is a little piece of yourself, right? So if your main character was going to give you advice, what would that advice be?
Take your Wellbutrin, because it does wonders.
Okay. Next.
Just talk about it. Like, just talk to the people in your life. Life is so much easier if you're just communicating. I think that's something that, like, you know, a lot of us will read books and we say to the characters, like, just talk about it. And so I think my characters would like say it back to me, a little bit of like, you know, a taste of my own medicine.
I would just agree with that. I feel like open communication and like talking is very prevalent in queer romance, especially. But in my own relationship, I'm like horrible at talking about my feelings and communicating. So yes, I would also take that advice from my own characters, if I could.
See, and I'm a little torn here. The Hellion's Waltz, I went back to some younger heroines because I was writing about a silk weaver in the early 19th century, and they tended to be on the younger side. And for me, I tend to be a very cautious person in pretty much all aspects of my life. And I tend to, I've also read a lot of romances. So like Alexandria said, talk it out. Like you talk to people, you communicate, you over communicate if necessary. And meanwhile, I have these two messy young 20-somethings who are concocting an elaborate heist to defraud a neighbor. And I'm like, I'm not taking advice from these people. Like, that's not why we're here. It works out, obviously, but it's not necessarily a course of action I'd recommend. Now, I think the one thing I would listen to them about is probably the importance of having a network, of having friends and family that support you, and of accepting that support, of knowing that you don't have to be the single person carrying that burden. You don't have to be the single person fixing everything.
Okay.
And I think this comes back down to queer romance and like issues of representation. The temptation is, if I do the thing that's necessary, the problem will be gone forever. And unfortunately, with queerness, that's categorically not true. That we need all of us to do the thing. We need as many queer voices and queer perspectives. We need queer people of color. We need disabled queer people. We need like the full spectrum of liberation.
All right, Alexandria, you're the last one who hasn't taken some advice from a character yet.
I think it was me, actually.
Sorry, Alyssa.
It's okay. I was just debating because the advice, if it was from How to Find a Princess, the advice would vary wildly. Makeda's advice would be, I guess, her lesson that she learns is that you cannot please everyone. Prioritize pleasing yourself, but you can still help other people. But if you don't help yourself, if you don't refill your own well, you cannot give to other people. Besnaria's advice would be always sit with your back to the wall, have a knife ready to go, and advice on how to get rid of bodies. So I'm not going to give that advice here. I guess relationship advice, honestly, she just follows rules that she got from her dad, so she doesn't really have her own. Her advice would be fall in love with Makeda. So that's. But if you do, I'll kill you because she's mine. So yeah, I don't really. She doesn't really have good advice. Sit with your back to the wall. Don't leave your back exposed to people.
maybe find that one, and when you do, don't give them up.
Yes,
something like that.
And if you kill anyone, don't mention it to them because anyway. Don't take advice from Besnaria.
Very nice, very nice. All right, one last question from me before we start getting to the reader questions, because there's a bunch of good ones piling up here. Is there something that you want to try next in the world of romance that you haven't done yet? And and what is it? You're all pioneers kind of already on the forefront, I feel like. So, but yeah, is there something you've wanted to do or it's in the back of your mind that you think, what's the next challenge? What's the next frontier? It might just be more of the same too, but what are you thinking?
I'm going somewhere very weird. Like, all my projects are very offbeat right now. A lot of them are paranormal. There's a sci-fi one. There's a very like Cold War mystery kind of novel, but they're all, like I said, they're all queer, but they're going in some cross-genre directions. And it's really fun. I'm excited about all of them, but I just don't know which one's coming up next. But yeah, it's
cool.
It's
cool.
Yeah, adventure.
Yeah, when you said you were going someplace really weird, I was like, oh, what tentacles? What's going on? But
yeah, no, that's like the space one is like weird. Like that one is, yeah.
I'm ready for that. I'm ready for some. Is it aliens? Okay.
No, it's a generation ship. It's like, if you can imagine a Wodehouse cruise ship in space, but also cozy mysteries. That's
all right,
what
this sounds amazing. This sounds
all
amazing.
kinds of shenanigans can happen on a big spaceship where you're stuck.
Yeah,
for
like
generations.
I came up, like somebody on Twitter mentioned, like, why don't they solve cozy mysteries on a generation ship? And I'm like, that's a great question. And the next thing I know, this whole world, I had this like 5-book series planned out, and I'm like,
there's a way in which the generation ship is the small town romance
Mhm.
of science fiction, right?
Plus you get to do things like have replicators and deal with issues of like space stuff being weird. It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of Star Trek in there, because I don't find dystopia very interesting, but I find utopia fascinating. So like they're trying to create this wonderful, cozy little safe, wholesome space for this 1,000-year journey. And of course the murder starts almost immediately.
Hijinks ensue.
Yeah.
What about the rest of you? What do you want to try next you haven't done before?
I'm also going to be doing, I have like a variety of things I want to try, but probably some paranormal. At the very least, I have to write a chicken shifter short story after teasing people for years now, and figure out how to make chicken shifters sexy. Because like having chickens, they are not sexy at all, but you got to make it, part of the craft. Got to figure out how to make gigantic chicken sexy. So yeah, I guess that.
I predict a lot of cock puns in your future.
Honestly, I'm gonna try and avoid it. I'll give myself one, and then I'm like, I gotta have the challenge of avoiding it. But yeah, that would be like for a fun short story. But yeah, and some paranormal stuff and probably more sci-fi. I had a series that was like rom-com dystopia that then went on hiatus because the real world turned into a dystopia. But eventually I will be finishing it, and have some fun ideas for that, and hopefully some ways to make it, like Olivia said, into a utopia instead of a dystopia.
Anyone else?
I also have some paranormals itching kind of to be written. I kind of want to explore some, not so much like witch paranormal, but like demons, ghosts, that kind of thing. I think ghosts, that's a challenge in a romance when someone's dead from the start, making that into an HEA. So I kind of want to challenge myself to write that. Also, some of those like fanfic tropes that work really great in fanfic. I want to challenge myself to write like a soulmates paranormal. I feel like that does really well in the fanfic space. I haven't seen a lot of those, like soulmates and fated mates work really great with like shifter romances, but I kind of want to write something that's like light paranormal, so not like heavy on the shifter side. So paranormals, that's where I don't know why, but my brain has been gravitating there as opposed to contemporary. I'm still contracted for 2 more after the fiance parts, my upcoming contemporaries, but now I'm like, the paranormals are just, percolating. I'm having to like fight myself and fight my brain, because that's what just wants. My Word document is open and I'm fighting myself constantly. I'm like, no, you have a contract, like get back to work. Paranormal.
What I'm hoping to work. Oh, sorry, Kosoko.
No, go ahead.
What I'm hoping to work on next after this series is done in a couple of years. I haven't even mentioned this to my editor, but I can mention it to you. It's not revolutionary really, but I'd like to delve into small town queer romance. So like to have all like, the cozy inns and bookstores and quirky town characters, and but not have it be like totally like utopia, like kind of like interrogating like that tension of queerness in small towns, because I'm from a very small town where I was very repressed and didn't know a single gay person growing up, and so Yeah, so it's not that it hasn't been done before, but I feel like I feel nervous about it because it will basically be me interrogating my own feelings about growing up in a small town where I couldn't be queer. So yeah, kind of that tension there. So that's what I hope to explore next.
This is a hard one. I really focused. So my next rom-com after A Dash of Salt and Pepper comes out in 2024. And it's called Wrangled and Entangled. And I really wanted to focus on the idea of late bloomer sexuality. So the love interest is a cowboy who fully, for a long time, thought that he was straight and really grows up in a small Montana town. And so only one person knows that he's gay. And that is pushed to the limits when the love interest comes into town and how that affects his life. So that was kind of like my magnus opus. I was like, I'm done after this. I don't know if I want to do anything else, but I really want to do like Gilded Age romances, but I hate research. So that in lies the problem that I have to struggle with, because I'm a STEM kid. I hate research. I just want to write the book and y'all can drag me into research.
First of all, you are now obligated to write this now that you have mentioned it in front of us.
Seconded.
And every time people say that they want to write historical and they don't want to do research, I feel like you can do it's the same amount of research that you would do for a contemporary romance. It just seems more daunting because it's like old stuff, but I really think that you can do it. And I will also say that within romance, it's okay. I do a lot of research. I'm not talking about, but within romance, it's its own fantasy history. Like if you have a ball, if you have like someone taking someone's glove, like you're good. There's wallpaper historicals are absolutely fine, and I encourage more marginalized people to write them because we don't have to research every single tiny detail because everyone else doesn't. It's cool. There can be deeply detailed historicals, researched historicals, and there can be wallpaper historicals. Everyone should have a chance to write a wallpaper historical, but also I think that you would do the research just fine. I'm sorry, this is my like,
No, preach.
this is my little thing that I'm like, no, anytime someone mentions it in front of me, you must write it. So now I'm going to be on your case. I'm going to be in your DMs. I'm going to be tracking you. I know you're busy right now.
And then you're going to send it right to me for review because, oh my God. Like,
let me I'm going to give you like a few months and then it'll just
Gilded
be
Age romance. Just like flood my inbox with that. Like
in 2 months, you're going to be like, so where is it?
No. I'm patient, but if I'm excited about something, I'm going to be excited about it. Like until it's done. You have 10 years. No.
Okay.
Sorry, did you say that the cowboy romance is called Wrangled and Entangled?
Yes,
that is such a good title. Oh my God. I can't wait.
Thank you.
God, romance is too much fun. Like, I love this genre.
Romance is exactly as much fun as it should be most of the time. All right, let's get to some reader questions before we run out of time. I'm going to go in the order they came. All right, anonymous attendee asks, do you have a particular reader in mind when you write?
Nope.
I have a hierarchy of readers, maybe. I want everyone to read them and like them, but Black women, Black neurodivergent women, Black queer women. And then, I mean, I'm assuming that everyone will enjoy the book. But basically, I mean, most people I think have an ideal reader that they want to feel seen. They don't, it's not like you are the only one who can read this, but the people who you want to be seen. So Black women and of all varieties is my, but it's not like, I'm not like everyone else, fuck off, you can't read it.
I can't think of the reader while I write, or I get like the writer equivalent of stage fright and nothing happens. I can think of the reader like 2 or 3 drafts in, but I have to like turn off the sense of being watched in order to get the words on the page.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of a combination of those two. While I'm drafting, I don't have a reader in mind. I am the reader. Like I'm writing to make myself happy while I'm drafting, or else I'm not going to get through it. But then once I reach the revision stage and, you know, I start getting more eyes on it, then I do start to think when I'm polishing, you know, this is who I do want to feel seen in this. And am I achieving that goal? But I can't get too wrapped up in it, or else if I, you know, put too much of that like pressure on myself, then I might not feel satisfied with the end result. I have to make myself and my editor happy, and then just hope, let it fly, hope that the readers will enjoy it.
All right, should we move on to the next one, or you guys want to jump in to your 2 cents? Next? Okay. What is a common challenge in your writing, and how do you overcome it? My challenge is procrastination, and I overcome it by making myself go to a cabin on the beach in the winter for a week. But
for me, it's definitely plot. Like I always just want to write about like two people having feelings, but like other things have to happen, I guess. And so like, yeah, so like I like tried to read craft books about like the beats that you're supposed to hit and like all the different like, you know, rules of writing a novel. And I'm like, how about they just kiss and like talk? So like, yeah, so I'm always kind of struggling like having that balance of like actually like a well-paced story in addition to having the emotional, you know, depth. So yeah, that's
this is gonna be a Debbie Downer answer, and I apologize. I struggle the most with being like a male author in the rom-com space. It is very difficult, more so than I expected. Like, I don't know if Berkeley's gonna kill me for this. If I end up dead, you know why. After I'm So Not Over You came out, which was like literally blasted everywhere, and I'm very, very appreciative. I had a long talk with Berkeley, and they were like, our numbers are showing that like readers don't want to buy rom-coms by men. Doesn't matter if they're queer books. They don't want to buy rom-coms by men. And that's like, I understand, I kind of get it. It's a female-dominated space, but like that's a hard thing to think about constantly when I'm reading and writing and to push through. And so that's like my biggest challenge every single time I sit down and write a rom-com. My YAs are great. I don't have an issue with those. I can crank those out in 2 months. Those are weird, and like the market's shifting. I'm sure in 10 years we won't be saying this anymore, but it's weird to be like on the front end of that. Oftentimes, like, listen, everyone's doing with like FF books.
I will just say I understand this completely. Not exactly, but I do understand, because you're here writing things, they're getting blasted, and then you're being like told that this isn't what's selling. I hope you can also tell them, don't tell me this. No, I'm serious. You can tell them and your agent, like, this is demoralizing to me while I'm if anyone else here is watching is a writer, this is, you can tell people what you want to know and what you don't want to know. And I will also say that like a lot of times numbers are just bullshit. And
as we learned in the trial this week.
If you've been watching this trial at all, it just verifies a lot of things. But I think numbers are bullshit, and I really don't like when, you know, people who are not really well represented in romance are given numbers and told things like that, because it's just demoralizing for no reason. If the numbers, and like the thing that I want to say to publishers, if the numbers are not good enough, that's on you. Like, don't tell me about it.
Yeah,
you do something about it. All right, wait, that's a whole different conversation.
I was gonna say I find that very suspect that they somehow know that the reason readers aren't buying it is because you're a male author, and I'm like, I don't buy it. I don't. That's.
I just think that I hope that the numbers improve, but I also don't think it's necessary. I don't think they purposely tell authors, whatever their background, the numbers to demoralize them. But I do think it can have a kind of chilling effect, especially if you're like trying to work and get the next book done, and they're like, oh, by the way, guess what? All that work might be for nothing. So yeah, I would also say that hopefully the tide will be changing quickly. It is like particularly interesting given how MM used to dominate, and now just within the space of like 3 years, suddenly publishing is acting like FF is the only, like,
I can explain some of that actually. I have capital T theories about that. So when MM used to dominate, like Kosoko said, it was primarily MM written by women. There weren't a lot of men working in that space. Like there were a few, but by far it was like still that same like female dominated space. Like, and this is mostly like in the more mainstream areas. Like you always have the indie presses that are doing the niche, like really interesting, like experimental type work. But in the mainstream romance space, it was a lot of MM written by women. And that's really what was kind of selling and hitting lists. But then I don't think it's a coincidence that the rise of all of this FF kind of dovetails with the rise of, like Anita was pointing out, own voices. Publishing was trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's like, oh, well, we definitely want like more own voices thing, but this like queer romance thing is still a big seller. So, we'll get women to write queer women, and then we can still make the money. And like, so it's this horrible little wedge that hits.
And I will say, it's also about like perceived as women, because I do know that, like, you know, there were many people who might have perceived themselves as women or were perceived by readers as women, but who were trans or non-binary. Publishers, I don't know, and like I think this is also, you know, tied to like patriarchy stuff and Trump and all of that. But I don't think that gives publishers the right to get off the hook about because like
problem,
the pen name problem, and like also you know, having queer romances written by men and by trans people, you know, these are things that they're really lacking on, and you know, really need to get their stuff together with. But okay, I'm just going on a tangent now. So
all right. Anyone else?
We're just trying to tell you, like,
time with Alyssa.
Anyone else want to?
Kosoko, it's not you. Yeah. You are doing nothing wrong. Like, I just want to.
I know.
Good.
I appreciate that. I know that. It took me a long time and lots of Taylor Swift to get there, but yeah.
All right. Anyone else got a writing challenge you want to describe before we move on to your solution for yourself before we move on to another question? No, you guys are. All of it's challenging, folks. All of it is challenging. All right, someone says, I'm so glad Cecilia mentioned fanfic. Are others on the panel fanfic readers and or writers? Anyone else going to confess?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it even like as a confession. I got my start writing Twilight fan fiction when I was in high school. Twilight was my gateway to romance. YA romance brought me into the genre as a reader. I don't believe in guilty pleasures, and so I don't count fan fiction reading or writing as one. I cut my teeth writing fanfic. I learned a lot about, you know, how to tell a story, how to get, you know, take criticism. I still read actively. I don't have the time. I wish I had more time to still write fanfic. But yeah, AO3 is always a browser that's open on my phone. So proud romance, fanfic, reader, writer. Yes.
I used to write it back in the day, back when I also got my start writing fanfic, and I reread some of my fanfic recently. The plots were great, exceptional. The pacing, magnificent. It was icon worthy.
I also wrote fanfic when I was a teen, before AO3 existed, I think. Just on like Angel Fire with like all lowercase, like starry black backgrounds. Little like rainbow banners in between the paragraphs. Yeah, I would not recommend trying to find it.
I think all of Angel Fire is gone now, right? I think.
Well, one of my friends that I found through fanfic back in the day, who's still one of my best friends now, she like found it on some like internet archive, and she sent it to me recently, and I was like, burn it in a fire. And she's like, this is how we met. It's our friendship. I'm like, no. I don't want this archived.
Some people want to burn their prom photos. Others people, yeah.
I read fanfic sometimes. I have read it. I've never really written it as an adult because I don't know why. It just never occurred to me to do it.
You don't have time, Alyssa.
Yeah, you have time now.
Part of it is that, but I will say that the first book that I ever wanted to write, that I first set out to start writing when I was 7 years old, was going to be a self-insert fanfic of Peter Pan and the Pirates, which was a cartoon. I don't know how many people ever saw Peter Pan and the Pirates, but it was going to be a self-insert fanfic. It was called Peter Pan and Me.
Literally self-insert fanfic.
I did not finish it. I also did have a Keanu Reeves self-insert fanfic a few years later. I think it was like around after when the Rush video came out. I don't know what happened to that. It disappeared somewhere. I'm sure like my mom saw it and was like, what is this? So I have written fanfic, just not online.
I wasn't quite nerdy enough to be into fanfic as a kid. I was a very lonely, like isolated nerd who I didn't watch Star Trek. I didn't play D&D. I didn't like read fanfic. It just wasn't, it was a very small school. It wasn't on my radar at all, which is a shame because I would have been heavily into all of those things. But I did get really into like Greek and Roman mythology. And it turns out Greek and Roman literature is basically a bunch of people doing fanfic of the same pantheon characters over and over and over, and like making little jokey references to each other's fics. And like ancient Latin poetry, they used to like write it for each other and play games with it and send it back and forth on little wax tablets that they called ships. So when I started learning about fanfic in college, I was just like, oh, the like all of those very fancy classical poets that we know would be all over this. They would think this is great. They all have their opinions on how the canon should go, and they would have big like angry arguments about interpretation and flame wars for days. And I love that this appears to be just a perennial human impulse, that if you see a story and you hear a story, you want to put a story back out there. That's magical to me.
I mean, the way I ended up writing romance, and not just science fiction and fantasy that happened to have a lot of sex and love in it, was my career was in a slump at one point and nothing was selling, and I had several books out on proposal and nothing was coming back, and I ended up writing Harry Potter fanfic like to stay in shape. Like, like I started, you know how addictive it is. You just kind of start writing. I got into some fests and whatnot. And the next thing I knew, it proved to me that I could write much, much faster, first of all, than I had been. And my agent was like, oh, you're writing Harry Potter fanfic? Now I can start selling you in romance. And, boom, everything took off from there. But, because I had written a Harry Draco time travel romance. And she was like, great, now you can write romance. You always said you couldn't write romance. You just proved that you can. And I was like, yeah, why did I say that? I don't know. So there it was. All right. Last question, I think it will wrap it up for us, is what advice do you have for someone who's writing their first romance novel?
Pull out all the stops. Write it as bonkers as you want. Just like lean full in. No subtlety, nothing's too over the top. All of it on the page.
I was going to say a similar thing. If it's queer romance, like be as queer as you want. If it's just romance in general, yeah, like be as cheesy, as like all out romantic as you want, because that's everyone's favorite.
No such thing as cringe in a first draft.
Yes. And I will also say, do not feel like you have to write. I mean, this is similar. It's just a variation of what Olivia and Anita just said, but don't feel like you have to write like anyone else. Don't try to fit whatever you think is the current trend. That trend will change, first of all. And yes, people want to read similar things, but like I feel like a lot of times, especially with people who are newer to romance, they're like, okay, I just have to write this, or I can only write this one trope, or this is what people want to read. Write what you want to read. First of all, because you're going to have to read it a lot. So you're going to have to read that book many times over. But also, yeah, just write what you want to read, because if you want to write it, if you want to read it, other people do too. You don't have to try to be anyone else. You don't have to match your style to anyone else. Find your voice as you're writing, and don't worry about what other people are doing or writing.
I was gonna say, just have fun. Make sure you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, I watched a seminar at RWA, I don't know if it was 2018. It feels like forever ago, about like writing for your id. I think it's Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I think you can maybe find some recordings that you can buy online still. I don't know. But just like writing a first draft that just brings you joy, that lights you up inside, write what makes you excited. That will eventually translate to making readers excited. And yeah, just have fun with it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with all of them. And the one thing I'll add is it's never too early or too late to start making writer friends who are going to be your support system, essentially. But that doesn't mean that you have to listen to all of their advice about what you're writing right now. You have to be kind of singular, I think, sometimes, especially when it's that first one of just, yeah, write what really turns you on and gets you excited, and, you know, the scenes that you want to find out, and then you fix it up later. It's revision is a whole nother kettle of fish. So, you know, but yeah, find the other people who will also love what you write and who will support you. You know, it's never too early. All right, I think we've come up on 8 o'clock. I think I'm going to hand things back over to the Harvard Bookstore, but thank you so much, Harvard Bookstore, for having us all here virtually. I would love to have seen you all in person, because now we can't go out for a drink and a meal. We'll just have to say goodbye on Zoom. But thank you so much, Bookstore, for having everyone.
Yeah, and thank you so much to both the authors and our panelists, and Cecilia and our audience for joining us today. It has been so great to spend this entire day sitting and talking with people about this genre that we all love. And so this has been so wonderful. Thank you for your time and your insights. And I love this panel. I was dying laughing over here and just had so much fun. If you would like to purchase a copy of any of these wonderful people's books, I have put the links in the chat down below. But on behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, have a great rest of your evening. Keep reading, and we will see you soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.